Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Education, SOE, Diploma in Elementary Education, DELED, English, BES 002 Teaching, Learning and Assessment Block -1 Teaching and Learning at Elementary Level Unit-2 Teaching and Learning, Different Perspectives 2.1 Introduction. All of us are engaged in the process of learning consciously or unconsciously. Learning is a continuous process that helps us to develop competence and ability to function in our environment. We acquire knowledge, skills and attitudes through the process of learning and develop competence and ability to apply whatever we have learned in one situation to other similar situations. From our experiences, we know that we learn consciously and unconsciously, both from our interactions in formal settings and informal settings such as home, community, marketplace, and our social interaction with others. Sometimes we learn through trial and error, sometimes we learn through our insights, and sometimes we learn through our social experiences and interaction. You might have also experienced that some persons learn very quickly while others take lots of time to learn the same thing. If you reflect on your life, you would find that you continuously improve on the basis of your experiences and actions over the years. Therefore, learning seems to be a very comprehensive term encompassing multiple interpretations. In this unit, we would discuss learning from different perspectives having implications for your classroom transactions. In this unit, we would discuss different views on learning and their subsequent influence on teaching. 2.2 Objectives. After going through this unit, you should be able to explain the concept of learning from behaviorist, cognitive, constructivist, and sociocultural perspectives, discuss the economic and political perspectives of teaching learning, distinguish between different types of learning, and describe the implications of different perspectives of learning on organizing learning experiences for students in the classroom. 2.3 Concept of learning during childhood. A child learns to walk, talk, interact with social groups, and learn the mannerisms of a particular community or society. Most of these behaviors are either acquired instinctively, or by observation or imitation. As a result, children are able to adjust themselves to the demands of environment. All of us admit that we have changed a lot due to various experiences of life. You have observed that when children join school they are so naive, but slowly they acquire educational as well as social skills that take them towards perfection. It may be stated that a person acquires behavior relating to knowledge, appreciation and skills through his/her interactions with others and through experiences. This acquisition of the stock of behavior facilitates better adjustment with environment and is the result of the process of learning. Learning is often defined as change in behavior that takes place due to experience or practice. But it is distinct from growth, which is a natural process of maturation and comes irrespective of experience. For example, a child's weight and height increase. It means that there is growth in the child. But the growth is different from learning. For example, before joining the school, a child was not able to perform addition or subtraction. After joining the school, he or she is able to perform them. This change in the child's ability to perform addition or subtraction is learning. Theories on human learning can be grouped into 4 broad perspectives. These are: 1. Behaviorism, focus on observable behavior. 2. Cognitive, learning as purely a mental/neurological process. 3. Humanistic, emotions and affect play a role in learning. 4. Social, humans learn better in group activities. Each of these approaches give their own perspective of the concept of learning, and within each of these perspectives there are a number of theories. Learning, according to behaviorist view, is considered as a permanent change in behavior due to experiences. Cognitivism defines learning as acquisition of knowledge, comprehension, skill, etc., while learning is considered as a process of knowledge construction based on the individual experiences of learner by the constructivist view of learning. Burns, 1995, conceives of learning as relatively permanent change in behavior, with both observable activities and internal process such as thinking, attitudes, and emotions. He considers that learning might not manifest itself in observable behavior until some time after the educational program has taken place. Let us now focus on the theories of learning in some details and see how they influence your classroom transaction. 2.3.1 Behaviorist Perspective: How small children learn alphabets or numbers in the school? Why do you give more and more exercises to small children? What is the relevance of exercise in learning? Have you ever given a thought on the principles underlying the learning process of children of your class? Take an example. What happens if something good smell comes from your kitchen? You start salivating. Here, smell of food is natural stimulus, NS, and salivation is natural response, NR. How the child learns that a particular bell is meant for the lunch break in the school. He or she associates and identifies different periods because of the association he or she is able to make between different activities carried out by different teachers or even by the same teacher in different periods on the basis of associations established between bell or teacher, stimulus, and the activities carried out in that period, such as mathematics, English or lunch period, etc. All these instances are examples of behaviorist way of learning. This school of thought defines learning as an association between stimulus and response. The organism responds to the stimuli present in the environment in several ways, and when it gets a most satisfying result, the association between the stimulus and the particular response is established, which results in learning. Association plays a very important role for beginners in the school. Association theory of learning has initial roots to the work of Guthrie, Pavlov, Watson, Thorndike and Skinner. According to E.R. Guthrie, if certain stimulus is followed by a response, then the next time that stimulus appears, the same response will follow. Guthrie believes that the teacher should provide stimulus for the students to respond. Skinner has identified two types of responses: first, the respondent response, and second, the operant response. Responses that occur due to external stimulus are voluntary reflexes and called as respondent responses. Responses that occur due to the consequences of an action are known as operant responses. All operant behaviors are voluntary actions. For instance, riding a bicycle, driving a car, going to a movie, watching TV, painting a picture, or writing a poem, etc., are called operants because they are operations that individual carries out to help him/her deal with the environment in some way. Behaviorist theories of learning thus consider learning as a change in behavior of the organism through conditioning process that occurs between a stimulus and a response. It is basically of two types: classical conditioning and instrumental or operant conditioning. Let us first discuss classical conditioning. Classical conditioning. Learning from the perspective of classical conditioning is reflex learning. It is also known as Pavlovian conditioning, named after Ivan Pavlov, a physiologist by profession who conducted famous experiment of salivation of dog. Under the experimental condition, he observed each time food was presented to the dog, it started salivation. Hence, food was unconditional stimulus, US, and salivation. The unconditional response, or, through his experiments, Pavlov demonstrated that after several trials, when food was presented followed by the sound of bell, conditioned stimulus, the animal developed an association between sound of bell and food. After few trials, it was observed that the dog started salivating by the mere sound of the bell even if the food was not given to him. This is known as the principle of association or continuity. Children learn in many different ways. They produce similar response to stimulus having similarity, which is known as principle of generalization. For instance, they are able to identify apple from the basket of fruits irrespective of its color or texture. They are able to apply their mathematical knowledge to day-to-day transaction at the grocery shop, etc. The ability of differentiation is known as the principle of discrimination. For example, in Pavlov's experiment, when the dog was given food on the sound of bell, and not on some other sound, after some trial he was able to distinguish the sounds of bell and other sound. With the result, it salivated only on the sound of bell. However, if the sound of bell was not followed by food, then after some trials the association between bell and salivation was weakened and gradually the dog stopped salivating. This is called as principle of extinction. Generalization, discrimination and extinction play a crucial role in the learning process at the initial stages where simple learning takes place. As a teacher, you would like your students to acquire positive attitude towards you and your subject. Your attitude and behavior in the class may help in developing interest among students to study the subject. You can use classical conditioning to develop positive association between your teaching activities and learning. However, classical conditioning is of little help in guiding us about how children learn. We all know that children learn in many different ways, sometimes by trial and error, sometimes by developing insight into the problem, and sometimes by the life experiences. Let us then understand some more complex forms of learning. Trial and error learning. If you observe the learning style of children, you find that sometimes they just use trial and error method, while on other occasions, they are more focused and use their insight in learning. They are also influenced by reward and punishment and their own mental preparedness, etc. Thorndike believed that learning is incremental and individual learns through trial and error approach. His theory of learning did not consider that learning takes place as a result of mental constructs. Instead, he demonstrated how mental connections are formed through positive response to particular stimuli. For Thorndike, learning was based on an association between sense impressions and an impulse to action. He emphasized that the environment could be structured in such a way to ensure that some stimuli would produce learning. With the help of his experiments on a cat, Thorndike demonstrated that reward has a positive impact on cat and helped in developing SOE connection. Through his experiments, Thorndike derived several laws that have implications for teaching and learning. They are as follows. Law of effect. Law of effect means that behaviors that bring a satisfying effect, reinforcement, have the probability to be repeated again, whereas behavior that brings about negative effect, punishment, is apt to be suppressed. Therefore, this law involves the emotional reaction of learner. As a teacher, you should bear in mind that learning will be more effective in a pleasant and conducive environment, where learners derive satisfaction and appreciation for their work. In contrast, if the experiences are unpleasant, they tend to avoid it. Law of readiness. It means that mental and physical readiness of the learner influences his/her learning. Take the instance of your classroom. You might have observed that when your students are motivated and ready to learn, they actively participate in classroom activities and are more receptive. The physical maturity of students is also a crucial component that affects his/her readiness for learning. Law of exercise. There is a saying that practice makes a man perfect. Law of exercise emphasizes that repetition is basic to development of adequate responses. All of us need exercise, as we can rarely recall new concept or practice after a single exposure. Every time we practice, learning gets reinforced. From the descriptions of these principles, it is clear that physical maturity, mental readiness, and pleasant experiences in school and adequate exercise plays crucial role in teaching learning process. Operant conditioning, role of reward and punishment in learning. One of the significant contributions of behaviorism is the role of reward and punishment in the process of learning given by Skinner. Skinner believed that behavior is a function of its consequences. His theory of learning is known as operant or instrumental conditioning, as the consequences of behavior lead to changes. The learner repeats a behavior if the consequence is pleasant, and avoids the behavior having negative consequence. Skinner has explained learning with the help of reinforcement. Reinforcement is a reward or a stimulus condition that augments the frequency of behavior preceding it. It is both positive and negative. Positive reinforcement is a positive reward that strengthens the stimulus-response bond. It is both verbal, such as praising or rewarding, and non-verbal, such as nodding the head in appreciation, smiling, etc. Negative reinforcement also strengthens a behavior and refers to a situation when a negative condition is stopped or avoided as a consequence of the behavior. Both facilitate learning and strengthen it. Punishment, on the other hand, weakens a behavior. It is very important for you here to understand the difference between negative reinforcement and punishment. Let us examine the instances given below and try to understand the difference. Instance 1: you are teaching in the class but students are not able to concentrate because there is lots of noise outside. You asked a student to close the door, and after this, the noise reduced and students are able to concentrate in their studies. Instance 2: you are teaching in the class but one student is not paying attention and disturbing others, so you ask him to go out of your class. Instance 3: the child has given good response, you smile and nod your head to show your pleasure. The first instance is an example of negative reinforcement, as noise has been intervening the learning process and closing the door has facilitated learning, while the second instance is an example of punishment, as some unwanted behavior has been shown and through punishment you are trying to ensure that it can be discouraged. Third instance is positive reinforcement. We use reinforcement in the classroom daily while teaching. Sometimes you praise a student, sometimes write comments like good, fair or needs improvement on their assignments/works, and sometimes simply show your pleasure or displeasure through facial expressions and gestures. Reinforcement plays a very important role in behaviorist learning theory given by Skinner. Through various schedules of reinforcement, Skinner demonstrated that behavior can be shaped or modified. Principles of operant conditioning have been widely used in programmed learning and preparation of programmed learning materials for individualized instruction. Box: applying behaviorist learning principles in classroom makes students understand the rules and regulations of the class. Encourage students to work in small groups for difficult learning tasks. Greet students and smile at them. Inform students clearly and specifically the format of test, examination or quiz. Use attractive learning aids. Provide feedback to students on their performance. Reinforce student each time he or she performs correctly. Vary the frequency of reinforcement to ensure students are attentive. Give ample time to students to prepare and complete the learning tasks. 2.3.2 Cognitive perspective. According to behaviorism, learning is the product of stimulus-response bond or association that takes place due to the presentation of a series of discrete stimuli and the resulting responses. Learner's response is linked to a particular stimulus through mere trial and error. Insight plays no role in learning process. The behaviorist perspective was later on criticized by many theorists, who believed that individuals perceive situation as a whole and their learning is based on this perception and not merely through trial and error or on the basis of reward and punishment. This learning theory is known as Gestalt theory and associated with the Gestalt psychology. Psychologists such as Brunner, Piaget, and Ausubel worked on cognitive learning, based on Gestalt psychology. Cognitive theories focus on how people gain an understanding of themselves and their environment, and how, in using this, they act in relation to their environment. The earlier cognitivists used the term insight to explain the approach to problem solving, while the modern cognitivists view human beings as information processors. The basic principles underlying cognitivism is that learning is an active process involving change in cognitive structure of concepts in mind, and it requires cognitive efforts and accurate conceptual understanding. For example, if a student lacks conceptual understanding of various mathematical equations, he or she may not be able to solve it correctly. Cognitive theorists emphasize experience, meaning-making, problem-solving, and development of insight. Therefore, according to cognitive perspective, learning is an active and dynamic process in which perceptions are processed through differentiation, generalization, and restructuring. Differentiation, as the name suggests, is the learner's ability to distinguish between different objects or experiences. Let us take a very common example. An infant perceives all adult ladies as mother, but gradually he or she starts differentiating them into mother, aunt, nurse, teacher, and servant, etc. This process of differentiation assists in the process of generalization and vice versa. Through the process of generalization, things, objects, and events having similar characteristics are put in one group. The learner gradually starts categorizing things, objects, and concepts in separate categories having common characteristics. For instance, if you have asked students of the class to identify birds and animals from the list of names such as dogs, pigeon, parrot, cats, crow, and cows, etc., and they are able to correctly categorize it in two groups, they have used the principles of generalization and differentiation. The process of differentiation and generalization leads to the process of restructuring. The learner restructures his/her cognitive structure to accommodate these differentiated and generalized concepts to gain control of himself, herself, and the world. Developmental theory of Piaget. Piaget was one of the important cognitive psychologists whose contribution to cognitive development of child is widely acknowledged. Piaget believed that students create knowledge rather than receive knowledge from the teacher. He recognized that students construct knowledge based on experiences, and this knowledge construction process is related to the biological, physical, and mental stages of development. Piaget has explained cognitive development through 4 important stages of development which occurs in a sequence. Each phase has a defined maturational period and distinct cognitive abilities. These 4 phases are presented in Table 2.1. Table 2.1, Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Look at the screen. Piaget's views of learning were more descriptive of cognitive development that invited 2 major criticisms. First, his analysis stops at the age of 15, whereas individuals continue to grow and develop cognitively. Second, for Piaget, the stages of development are relatively discrete. Brunner later on provided a more prescriptive theory of learning. Brunner emphasized more on the nature of learner, the structure of knowledge, and the nature of knowledge acquisition process. Piaget's work created the foundation of constructivism and has 2 major implications for teaching and learning. First, learning came to be considered as an active process in contrast to the behaviorist perspective of stimulus-response association. The experiences of learners were recognized and considered essential for assimilation and accommodation of information. The second important contribution of Piaget's theory is that learning should be whole, authentic, and real. Learning occurs as the child interacts in meaningful ways with the world around him. Therefore, direct teaching in the classroom has to be replaced by facilitating conditions by the teacher that enables learners to construct their own knowledge through their own experiences. Piaget advocated active schooling in order to ensure full development of human personality. He emphasized the role of play in the formation of symbolic thought, and discussed certain socio-emotional benefits of play. He suggested work-oriented classrooms and combining work with play. The most important implication that can be drawn from Piaget's work is his emphasis that teachers must establish egalitarian and cooperative relationship with children and promote their autonomy. Teachers, therefore, should involve learners in the decision-making process about classroom events and procedures, conflict resolution, and social and moral discussions. They promote learners' shared experiences, reciprocal reasoning, and feeling about relations with others. Brunner developed the idea that if complex material is broken down into essential ideas, any student can learn any subject matter. He developed the concept of spiral curriculum. Brunner advocated the discovery learning approach. Learner should be presented a problem situation and motivated to seek alternative solution. Therefore, instruction based on Brunner's theory is learner-centered, placing learners as active participants. Learners should be actively engaged in the learning process, and varied experiences should be provided to learners to ensure that their individual needs and individual differences are properly addressed. It is also important to provide reinforcement at important juncture, as such knowledge would be useful in moving forward to achievement of goal. According to Brunner, learning is an active process in which learners construct new ideas and concepts based upon their current/past knowledge. The learner selects and transforms information, constructs hypotheses, makes decisions and relies on cognitive structures to do so. Cognitive structure, i.e., schemata and mental models, provides meaning and organization to experiences, and allows individual to go beyond given information. Bruner illustrated his theory in the context of mathematics and social science programs for young children, but it can be applied to all subjects. He acknowledged various stages of development of learner, however, unlike Piaget, he did not specify any age at which these developments may take place. Therefore, while Piaget's learner progresses from one stage to another, according to Bruner's developmental stages, it is possible for an adult to switch from iconic to symbolic as opposed to going from formal operational to sensory motor. Bruner emphasized the role of social context in learning and observed that knowledge construction is not an isolated process but is embedded in the social context. He identified 3 stages of cognitive growth: an active stage in which the child represents and understands the world through actions that involve motor responses, or ways to manipulate the environment. The second stage, according to Bruner, is iconic stage in which the child represents the world in images that stand for certain objects and events. This stage corresponds to Piaget's pre-operational stage and its principle of conservation. The third stage is symbolic stage in which child is able to use abstract ideas, symbols, language, and logic to understand and represent the world. Bruner's method of teaching, called discovery learning, is based on his theory of constructivism and is widely used in science and mathematics teaching. According to Bruner, issues or question that guides the discovery process must be personally and socially relevant. Curriculum should, therefore, be organized in a spiral manner so that students can build upon what they have already learned. His concept of spiral curriculum is based on the idea that any subject can be taught effectively in some intellectually honest form to any child at any stage of development. In short, the principles that permeate Bruner's theory are given below. Instruction must be based on the prior knowledge of learners that help learners' readiness and ability to learn. For example, a teacher of geography, before teaching latitude and longitude, must ensure that students have prior knowledge of maps and globe. Instruction should be structured so that it can easily be understood by learners, but instead of linear organization of instruction, it should be spiral to enable the learner's movement back and forth based on his/her individual experience and familiarity with the content. While teaching diversity, a teacher at elementary level should organize the content around the student's familiarity with linguistic, religious and cultural diversities. Instruction should be designed to facilitate extrapolation, going beyond the given information. After telling students that environmental pollution may be air pollution, noise pollution, water pollution, etc., teacher may ask the students to think any other pollution they know. Bruner also recognized the importance of the role of language in cognitive development. He investigated how adults use language to mediate the world for children and help them to solve problems. Scaffolding talk that supports a learner in carrying out an activity as a kind of verbal version of fine-tuned help is important in this context, which facilitates the process of knowledge construction. Bruner maintained that people interpret the world in terms of similarities and differences which are detected among objects and events. Objects that are viewed similar are placed in same category. The major variable in his theory of learning is the coding system into which the learner organizes the category. Bruner's theory of cognitive learning emphasizes the formation of these coding systems. Coding systems facilitate transfer, enhance retention, and help in problem solving and motivation. He advocated discovery-oriented methods in schools which help students to discover the relationship between various categories. Bruner's major contribution has been in the area of process of education and the development of curriculum theory. For example, a science teacher while teaching animals can ask students to categorize them into herbivorous and carnivorous. Another psychologist who made significant contribution towards learning is David Bell, who gave the theory of receptive learning, RL, or meaningful verbal learning, MVL, and advanced organizer. According to Bell, meaningful learning process presupposes 2 things: A, the learning task is potentially meaningful or that it can be related substantively to the learner's cognitive structure, and B, the learner manifests a corresponding set to relate it. Meaningful learning entails the internalization of material presented to the learner through progressive differentiation and integrative reconciliation. Thus, meaningful learning depends on the nature of material to be learned, and the availability of relevant content in learner's cognitive structure. Unless these two conditions are met, it is unlikely that learning will take place. This theory has relevance especially for classroom teaching because it emphasizes the previous experiences of learners in meaningful learning. In such type of learning, potentially meaningful material enters the cognitive field and interacts with and appropriately subsume under a relevant and more inclusive system. There are three kinds of meaningful reception learning. These are representational learning, concept learning, and propositional learning. Representational learning, this type of learning takes place in early childhood. Period. It involves learning the meanings of symbols and words and what they represent, such as when a child learns the meaning of the word cat or dog or cow, he or she is able to relate the sound of cat or dog with her perception of cat or dog. Concept learning, concepts are learned on the basis of its dominant features or attributes. Concept formation takes place when the child is able to identify cat on the basis of its certain attributes which are different from cow or dog. Some concepts are learned through physical encounter of the object while others through concept assimilation process. For example, the child has the concepts like chair, table, etc. in her cognitive structure. The new concept furniture can be assimilated by relating the attributes of the new concept with already existing concepts. The new concept subsumes the concepts already existing in the cognitive structure. Propositional learning, a proposition refers to a combination of more than two concepts giving rise to a composite meaning. When a learner learns a combination of concepts or ideas having a composite meaning, propositional learning takes place. For example, dog is an animal is a proposition combining two concepts, dog and animal. Both these concepts give rise to a composite meaning. Principles of Ausubel's meaningful reception learning theory can be applied to classroom setting in the following ways. 1. The most general ideas of a subject should be presented first and then progressively differentiated from the specific ideas. For example, while teaching the concept of furniture, the teacher should start with the concept of furniture and then go to the concepts like table, chair, sofa, in terms of its detail and specificity. 2. Instructional materials should attempt to integrate new material with previously presented information through comparisons and cross-referencing of new and old ideas. 3. Teachers should incorporate advanced organizers when teaching a new concept. 4. Teachers should use a number of examples and focus on both similarities and differences. 5. Teachers should discourage rote learning of materials that can be learned more meaningfully. 2.3.3 Constructivist perspective. Constructivism is a theory which regards learning as an active process in which learners construct and internalize new concepts, ideas and knowledge based on past knowledge and experiences. Knowledge is constructed rather than received. The word constructivism has come to serve as an umbrella term for diversified views. It is the label given to a set of theories about learning which fall between cognitive and humanistic views. It offers an explanation of the nature of knowledge and human learning, focusing on learning as conceptual change. Driver and Oldham, 1986, Necessian, 1989. It maintains that individuals create and construct their own understanding or knowledge through the interaction of what they already know and believe, and the ideas, events and activities with which they come in contact. According to the constructivist perspective, learning is an active process of constructing knowledge instead of acquiring knowledge. Unlike the behaviorist perspective, instead of imitation or repetition, knowledge is acquired through the learner's active involvement and manipulation of contents. And instruction is a process of supporting knowledge construction rather than communicating knowledge. Constructivism is, therefore, an epistemology of learning developed on the premise that reflection on experiences, while constructing their own understanding of the world, allows learners to formulate a more concrete meaning of subject matter. Each learner generates his/her own rules and mental models which are used to make sense of experiences. Knowledge, therefore, is not mechanically acquired but actively constructed within the constraints and offerings of learning environment. Consequently, the mechanistic view of learners as passive recipients of knowledge was replaced by the constructivist view of learners as active knowledge constructors. Therefore, learning is not mere absorption of knowledge, and learner is no longer controlled respondent to stimuli as in the behaviorist approach but is considered as already a scientist. Solomon, 1994, p. 16, who actively constructs learning while trying to make sense of the world through his own experiences, goals, curiosities, and beliefs. Knowledge, according to constructivist epistemology, cannot be transferred intact from one individual to another, and therefore, learning and teaching cannot be synonymous. We can teach, even well, without having students learning. A basic premise of constructivism is that individuals live in their own world of personal and subjective experiences and build new knowledge on the basis of their previous experiences, rather than new knowledge being imposed from outside. The role of teacher, therefore, undergoes a major transformation from the imparter of knowledge to facilitator of conditions, which help learner in the process of knowledge construction. You, as a constructivist teacher, have to consciously select activities and learning experiences for your students with which they are familiar and then try to take them towards more difficult and unknown concepts. Types of constructivism. There are three major classifications of constructivism, like the trivial constructivism, radical constructivism, and social constructivism. Trivial constructivism, TC, considers that knowledge is actively constructed by the learner, not passively received from the environment. This perspective believes prior knowledge of learner as essential for him/her to facilitate the construction of new knowledge and emphasizes objectivity of knowledge. Radical constructivism, RC, the basic principle of RC is that any kind of knowledge is constructed rather than perceived through senses. Each individual constructs his/her own reality. Two basic principles underlying radical constructivism include: I, knowledge is not passively received but actively built by the individual, and 2, the function of cognition is adaptive and serves the organization of the experiential world, not the discovery of ontological reality. In other words, reality is subjective, filtered through the prism of individual experiences and sensory perception. Radical constructivist rejects the possibility of objective knowledge and believes that all knowledge depends on the cognitive structure of knower. Therefore, subject and object are not independently existing phenomena but the construction of the learner. Social constructivism, SC, in contrast to the RC, SC emphasizes the role of culture and context in developing personal and shared interpretation of reality. It emerged largely from the work of Piaget, Vygotsky, Brunner, and Bandura. Vygotsky, a Russian psychologist, laid the foundation of social constructivism by adopting a socio-cultural approach to cognitive development based on the assumption that action is mediated and cannot be separated from the social milieu in which it occurs. The social constructivist model emphasizes culture as the prime determinant of individual development. Both radical and social constructivists believe that reality is constructed, but, according to social constructivism, the reality exists in the social context and learning is a social process. Therefore, the notion of reality, knowledge, and learning all are situated in the social context. It is based on the assumption that reality is constructed through human activity. Reality cannot be discovered and it does not exist prior to its social invention. Knowledge is also a human product and is socially and culturally constructed. Individuals develop meaning through their interaction with each other and with the environment. Consequently, according to social constructivists, learning is a social process and meaningful learning occurs when learners are engaged in social activities. Social constructivism of Vygotsky shared many of Piaget's views about child development, but he was more interested in social context of learning. The social constructivist model proposed by him emphasizes culture as the prime determinant of individual development. Learners are believed to be encultured into their learning community, and learning is considered to be largely situation or context-specific activity. Vygotsky suggests that every function in the child's cultural development occurs twice or on two levels. First, it appears on the social level, and then on the individual or psychological level. Vygotsky focused on the intersection between individual and society through his concept of zone of proximal development, ZPD. ZPD level has been defined as a distance between the actual developmental level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. Vygotsky, 1978, p. 85. During this interactive process, meanings are shared and information exchanged. By comparing their knowledge and understanding with others, students develop new understanding. The ZPD, therefore, indicates learners' readiness to learn by emphasizing upper level of competence. You can promote learning if they are aware of and understand the concept of zone of proximal development ZPD, and how it is facilitated by certain approaches to teaching and assessment. Teachers, who can utilize ZPD to ascertain what students already know and are ready to learn and then organize structured learning experiences accordingly, can be more successful and effective. Vygotsky's constructivism suggests that learning environment should involve guided interactions that permit learners to reflect on inconsistencies and to change their conceptions through communication. Language plays an important role in Vygotskyan constructivism. Language is initially used as a means of communication between adult and child. Gradually it is internalized into a means of the child's own thinking and control of his/her own activity. Young children can often be observed talking to themselves. As they grow older, they gradually speak less and less louder, and are able to differentiate between social speech for others and inner speech. According to Vygotsky, 1978, the child begins to perceive the world not only through its eyes but also through its speech. And later it is not just seeing but acting that becomes informed by words. Language provides the child with a new tool, opens up new opportunities for doing things, and organizing information through the use of words as symbols. The key to understanding the role of language in mental development lies in dual nature of word meaning or language use called discourse. Each word contains two levels of meanings. One is the object or phenomenon the word refers to in the objective reality. The other is the relationship of word with other words. Both the levels combine to give the word its social semiotic significance. The child learns by imitating the immediate social environment, which is in turn influenced by the culture. The cultural context, therefore, acquires immense importance and makes learning contextual and culture-specific, and language is important for determining how the child will learn how to think because advanced modes of thought are transmitted to the child through words. Now let us try to reflect on the teaching-learning process of classroom. We will find that teachers utilize a variety of classroom practices that are based on all these ideas about learning. Contemporary learning theory recognizes that both experience and reflection play an important role in the development of ideas and skills. As a teacher, you will agree that trial and error, reinforcement and practice are important in development of skills, and so do cognitive intent, effort, reflection and problem solving. We also acknowledge the importance of developmental stages and recognize that development can also be encouraged by social interaction and structuring of experiences within the learner's zone of proximal development or readiness sphere. The role of culture, socio-emotional development and other influences on experiences also shape the learning process of students. Therefore, the teaching-learning strategy is determined by the level of cognitive development and maturity of learners, their previous experiences, and the socio-cultural context. 2.3.4 Socio-cultural perspective. The socio-cultural context of the child is crucial, as everything he or she learns takes place in particular social context. Culture comprises the pattern of values, beliefs, and behaviors common to a particular group of people. Child learns a lot in social environment through two processes. These are A. Inculturation and B. Acculturation. Let us discuss these processes. A. Inculturation. A child learns the fundamentals of his/her culture initially through his/her interaction with parents, siblings, peer group, community, and then with school and teachers. This is known as inculturation. We may define inculturation as the process by which individuals acquire knowledge, skills, attitude, and values that enable them to become functioning members of a particular society. It may be known as both conscious and unconscious conditioning processes that develop competence in individual to internalize his/her own culture, its norms of behavior, traditions, and values. You consciously teach your small child to greet a guest in a particular manner, which is internalized after repeated conscious efforts, and the child becomes conditioned and automatically greets a person whenever he or she meets him/her. You can find out a number of such examples that indicate towards the inculturation process of children, while socialization in home and society takes place through informal ways. School is the place for formal education and molding the child according to the socio-political orientation of a particular society. Children develop the values of sharing, caring, cooperation, friendship, equity and equality, sympathy and tolerance in family and school through interaction with peers, elders, and teachers, etc. Children learn to control their emotions, show respect to national symbol and national anthem, cooperate with others, etc. Because of this inculturation process, children are made aware of their own culture, traditions, folk tales, folklores, and social practices through inculturation process. B. Acculturation. Whereas inculturation is the adoption of appropriate behavior of one's own culture, acculturation is the learning of one's host culture. It is the process of adaptation to other cultures' norms and traditions without compromising one's own cultural values and norms. Take one concrete example in school. Children from various cultural groups and religious beliefs are given admission. They greet the teacher generally by saying good morning, while at their home and particular community they may be following various other methods of greeting elders. Therefore, they learn the common norm of greeting in school while not compromising with their own particular cultural identity. Immigrants, who move from one culture to another culture, make that culture their new home. It helps in adjustment of the person in new culture. The child coming from tribal area slowly learns, adapts to the urban culture. In other words, inculturation and acculturation are two processes of learning in sociocultural settings, while inculturation is the first process and acculturation is the second process of learning in sociocultural settings. The first process of learning involves acquiring one's mother tongue, adopting traditional dress, customs, food, music, and dance, etc., while second process involves learning about others' customs, traditions, and language, etc. Socialization includes both the processes of inculturation and acculturation. It is a learning process that begins shortly after birth. It denotes the process through which the individual acquires current societal norms and structures, thus becoming the part of society to which she/he belongs, and also learns to adjust to different cultures and traditions. From birth and throughout our lives, our interactions with others shape our understanding of the world. Learning occurs as children play with each others, talk with their parents, and interact with teachers. The process of socialization and social interaction develop languages which support thinking and provide feedback also. The socio-cultural ethos and social interactions form the basis of understanding of the child. As a result, teachers are constantly called upon to face the challenges of not only added work in content areas in their curriculum, but also a number of problems related to the cultural diversity and socio-emotional adjustments of learners. The classroom teacher plays a key role in shaping these social interactions when she/he assesses students' current understanding or prior knowledge and creates situation that allows them to grow further. As a teacher, you should be well aware of the cultural diversity of learners and integrate the cultural contexts and examples in teaching learning process. In your classroom transactions, you may use examples of local contexts rather than examples from outside the cultural context of students. Children learn in a variety of ways through experience, making and doing things, experimentation, reading, discussion, asking questions, listening, thinking and reflecting, etc., both individually and with others. Therefore, you have to evolve a variety of approaches using local resources to ensure that learning takes place. You may engage children in collaborative learning activities involving thinking, listening, speaking, planning and executing the work that may provide opportunity to students to work in teams and learn from each other. Peer tutoring and project work in small groups provide ample opportunity to develop social cohesion and understanding about each other's. You can use the example of local history and try to connect it with regional and national history. Children should be helped to develop critical understanding of their social reality and social problems such as child marriage, deprivation of certain sections of society, local traditions and customs impeding equal opportunity of boys and girls and various dogmas prevailing in the society. 2.3.5 Economic and political perspective. Education is considered as an instrument for wider socio-economic reforms and therefore government frames educational policies and takes decisions on the education system from time to time. For instance, the commitment towards universalization of elementary education, UEE, has been addressed through the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA, scheme of the central government. The central government has amended the constitution from time to time to implement its constitutional commitment for such as the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment related to Panchayati Raj institution that helped in decentralization of education, and 86th constitutional amendment making education a fundamental right of each and every child of the country, that eventually culminated in RT Act of 2009. State governments also frame education policies for their respective states which has a bearing on the education system. RT Act 2009, for example, recommends no detention policy, admission to grade that is age appropriate, and bridge course for such child, inclusive education, special coaching to students in school premises, no discrimination on any ground, no corporal punishment, and continuous and comprehensive evaluation, ensuring the quality of education, etc. Each state also has its own policy for achieving state-specific educational objectives. All these recommendations provide guidelines for teaching learning processes in the classroom. 2.4 Summary. In this unit, we have learnt about various learning theories that have implications for teaching learning process in the classroom and which determines the role of teacher. From the behaviorist perspective, teacher plays a more dominant role in teaching learning process as behaviorism emphasizes that learning takes place due to presentation of a series of discrete stimuli and resulting responses. The main emphasis of early cognitive theories was that learning task is perceived in a holistic perspective instead of atomistic perspective. So it gives importance to perception of the whole, and not the collective association of ideas given by behaviorists. Constructivism, on the other, emphasized the active role of learner in building understanding and making sense of information. We have also discussed that the policies and socio-cultural context of learners are also crucial, and as a teacher you have to keep in mind these policies and social cultural context while teaching. In the final analysis, different views of learning can be used together to create productive and eclectic learning environment. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.